Hello and welcome to episode 108 of MMO Weekly, presented as always by Chitty's Cheesesteaks. I'm your host, Sal Manzo, joined by a couple familiar faces here. Our producer, John Luke Chaparro, in front of the camera tonight. Thank you so much. Reporting live, one of the boots on the ground from this undefeated homestand, so we're going to talk to him about that. And of course, friend of the show, the king, as you can see from his crown there, Patrick Lynn. Thank you so much for coming back on, guys. Appreciate it.
Thank you. I didn't recognize the little king there. I thought that was what every guest got, but I appreciate having
No, we saved that. We saved that just for you, Pat. Don't worry
right.
about it.
108 episodes. I feel like I haven't been on since like number 50.
Well, we picked a good number because, we're talking about numbers right now. 7-0. The Mets went undefeated in this homestand. Is that correct? I think I'm counting right. Seven wins in a row. You swept the Cardinals, the Phillies. Seems like the Phillies are broken. I don't know what the Mets did. Dating back to last October, but it feels like the Philadelphia Phillies don't know what to do anymore, especially when they play the Mets. Citi Field feels like maybe the best home field advantage New York sports has going right now, which is saying something. And the Mets just keep rolling along. The pitching has been phenomenal with a lot of guys. Again, I guess a lot like last year, you wouldn't expect much out of, but continue to get, deliver. Bullpen's been spectacular. Edwin Diaz, one leg is bigger than the other. We'll get to that, but he's doing okay. And the Mets just keep on hitting. Pete Alonso, hot it can be. And Francisco Lindor. I had a friend say to me the other day, has not seen clutch homers like that from a Met late in games since Mike Piazza. Been a long time, and I think that's a phenomenal comp. I gave him a lot of credit for that. And it just shows that things are changing in Mets land and Flushing. It's the place to be. It's the place to play. And before we kind of dive into the nitty gritty of what was going on, John Luke, you were at some of these games for this homestand. The crowd for April, it felt like October. I just want to kind of get your thoughts about being there, the atmosphere, the crowd. How is it feeling right now, man? Because at home, it feels wild.
Oh, let me tell you, guys. I mean, in all the years that I've gone to Citi Field, I started going pretty consistently in 2015.
Sure.
And let me tell you, this is probably the best I've ever seen it. You know how they used to say back in the day when Shea was rocking, it was literally rocking.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not trying to speak in hyperbole here. Citi Field is rocking. The place is always loud. It's packed. It's engaged. Everybody's feeling it. But what makes it even better is they're playing well. Everybody's living and dying by every pitch. I had the opportunity to go to a few games at this homestand, and every single game felt like a party. You add in the light shows, you add in all the, extra stuff they put with the smoke coming out of the apple and the fireworks coming out, and even the Queen's crew, which was thought to be a joke at the first part when they brought him in, but now it's actually adding to the experience, and then obviously what helps is the team just being good. Like obviously the loudest I've heard Citi Field in a while is when Lindor walked it off against the Cardinals, because that was something of like this, it hit this apex where, yeah, you're just giving up the home run, but you had that confidence where you were like, yeah, they're going to win. And then you could even check out the game against Philly yesterday, which I had gone to as well. Philly takes the lead. Guy in front of me did this, which means don't worry, we got it. And lo and behold, I mean, they did, which I was confident, but you still like to see it. It's the most happening place to be. It's also just an aesthetically pleasing ballpark, if that already hasn't been said. But I'm telling you, it's been. I'll say this too. Went to a few playoff games last year. The atmosphere was unreal. I was at the game Jesse Winker and Pete Alonso homered. Went to a few NLCS games, even though they lost them. The starts were incredible. It was, the atmosphere was awesome. There seems to be more of this sort of, confidence now, where everybody like knows. It's like what my father would tell me about the 2000 team. It's like, something good's going to happen, So just being at Citi Field and being there with my friends and just enjoying the team winning. Oh my goodness. I can only fawn for so much. I mean, how much time do we have here? We got to talk about the Mets too, but it's just been, and anyone who's gone will tell you, it's just been an absolute madhouse. They've and this is the last thing I'll say. I'm trying to remember this correctly, but there was an Athletic article that asked, it was anonymous to different major leaguers around baseball. And they basically said, well, what do you think of Citi Field? And most people said it's like a nightclub. And truth be told, it is like a nightclub. because, if it's a night game, you got Narco coming out, the lights are going on and off, or when they change the pitcher, stand clear of the closing doors, please. And they got the beat going out and the blue and orange lights going around. It's like, you want to see New York. That is the epitome of New York at its finest. Whew.
That's what you're talking about, John Luke, is it's not in Mets fans' DNA, right?
Sure.
Confidence, partying, at least in the not in the last 30 years, right? It's all of these things that I wonder, from your perspective, as someone who's going to the games pretty frequently, is it a mix of like high expectations? Is it still riding the high off last year? Is it the fact that Pete Alonso's back? Is the ballpark packed just because Steve Cohen basically said, hey, you guys need to start packing up this ballpark? I've got a $76 million guy to pay for. What do you think it is? Is it just the fact that they've gotten off to a hot start and these things are just compounding?
I think this is going to sound like a cop-out answer. I think it's a mix of all three, because I think when Steve Cohen made the comment, I think fans kind of took it a little personal, because people, and if you go online, you can see people I kind of took it a little personal myself to a degree, because, I am a season ticket member. I've been for a few years now, and, you want to see your fellow fans show up. So I think it's just the mix of that. And then obviously with signing Soto, I mean, obviously that's the big catalyst. Everybody wants to see him. And then, now that he still hasn't hit a home run as of the recording of this video or this podcast at Citi Field, there's kind of like that tension built, that not tension, but like that excitement that's built up. And then obviously you're coming off of last year where, like, before the season, no one expected us to even win 70 games, maybe 75 at most. And now we're 2 wins away from a World Series potential pennant. So I think it's just kind of a mix of both, because there's just sort of like healthy, sort of energetic tension in the air where it's like, can't wait till what happens next. I can't wait till what happens next. And everybody's engaged. So I think just all in all, I think everything kind of just compounded together. And I think Soto was the cherry on top, because you can already tell even before they signed him that this was going to be a really fun season in terms of just excitement after just the playoff run alone. But you mix in getting Soto, you mix in then again Pete Alonso coming back. I think that was probably the crux of it all, truth be told. After Soto, we're basically, all right, we got our guy back. Now let's rock. So I think to what you're saying is it's kind of a culmination of everything. And then also too, you challenge New Yorkers, people in the tri-state area to a challenge. We're gonna come through. Of course, you're gonna tell a bunch of angry people from Brooklyn, Queens, and Long Island to, oh, hey, you're not doing enough. All right, bet. So,
yeah, it's I think just kind of going back to a typical Mets fan, right? Is that over the years, I think, like, psychologically, it's like you get so close to tasting it, and you get quote unquote let down, right? But if I'm being honest, I don't think Mets fans view most of their failures or not quite, making the World Series as a failure. I think all the hard times in between kind of set up a really good baseline of disappointment, or I don't even know if it's disappointment, so that when these good times do come around, I think what you just pointed out there was like a healthy level of like, we're going to enjoy it while it's here. Right. And I don't think we're used to these things lasting for years and years and years. And in the back of all of our minds is like, it's not going to last for years and years and years. But only time will tell with that part, but sounds like it's bumping.
Oh, 100%. Oh yeah. 100%.
Yeah, I mean, yesterday's game, you had 50,000 people playing hooky at 1 o'clock on a Wednesday. I was jealous. I wanted to be one of them. And exactly, I mean, that just kind of shows in itself, right? It's a getaway day. It's the middle of the week. It's not a holiday week or anything like that. The place was packed out like it was a playoff game. It was for 7 games the whole series. And kind of to your points, just as far as, I think, at least for me personally, I think fans' perspectives changed a lot about this when they went into Atlanta on the last game of the year and did what they did, vanquishing what felt like they haven't been able to do in 20 years, go into Atlanta and win big games. They did that. First time playing the Phillies in the playoffs, you have what happened there. And subsequently, we talked about it off camera, but it feels like the Mets have broken the Philadelphia Phillies. Obviously, we have a lot of games left. They're a really good team. Anything could happen. The Mets were written off at the end of May last year, and we saw what happened. So anything could be true. But there just seems to be this confidence now, less of in the back of your mind, ooh, I'm just bracing for when the bad's gonna come. It felt like last year alleviated a lot of that. And then with the signing of Soto now, like you said, bringing Alonso back, which proved to be probably bigger than Soto in the short term right now, as we know, I think there's just a confidence to be had. This team believes in itself. They believe in its core. Francisco Lindor is hot again. Obviously, he's leading the way. You could tell that. And it just feels like, these aren't fair weather vibes going on with this team. It feels like there's really, between the players that they have, the culture within the fan base now and everything else, it just seems like the corner that Cohen wanted to turn has finally turned. And I think, the duo of Cohen and Stearns have a lot to do with it. And these players want to play here. And, Lindor was just on the Boardroom podcast talking about how you talk about New York and events. Citi Field right now is the top ticket for that. We're not used to it, like you said, but I think we could get used to it being the case, hopefully for a few years now, hopefully, like you said, Patrick.
Sal, this is the part where you mentioned kind of going into Atlanta and winning some big games. This is the part where I reveal my residence of being here in Atlanta.
Sure.
And in 2022, I went to the first game of the 3-game series at the end of the year, where they had DeGrom, Scherzer, and Bassett lined up. And I went to the first game. A friend just kind of invited me along. The tickets were insane, naturally. Friend invited me along. I was sitting up in the 500s, and Jacob DeGrom, he almost gave up like back-to-back homers, I think. Or it was like in such rapid succession. That was kind of a low, right? And then I got to make up for it by going to the doubleheader at the end of the year last year.
Nice.
And that first game is the best live sporting event that I've been to in my life. And kind of like I think what we're describing here with like things can and will go right. That's kind of how I felt during that game, even as they were down 3-0. I still felt, okay, there's still a shot. That was kind of the ethos of that whole team last year. Right. We'll see the rest of this year, how things continue to go. And just by the way, if we want to do this real quick, the Jets just made a pick.
Probably not good. Who did they pick?
They picked Membu, the offensive tackle.
Armand Membu, the offensive tackle.
Cool.
There you go. So
a lot of things that work about him. I'm glad I don't have to do it anymore.
The biggest surprise, I think, is the one before that. The Raiders picked Ashton Genty.
Oh, wow. I could see that. But, football, that's in August. Forget that sport. Doing the number one sport. No, it's good stuff. Mike and I did a podcast here when Aaron Rodgers tore his Achilles live. So this is way better than that as a Jets fan. But we're here for the Mets. One thing the Jets don't do that the Mets started doing, Jets boo a lot of players because they're not great. Mets fans decided at the homestand, Juan Soto's going to be here for about 14 and a half more years. He's off to a bit of a slow start. Maybe let's not boo the man who's going to be here for half a lifespan, it feels like. Let's try and bring him up. And I have to give the fans a lot of credit for that. I know that's not the norm here. We understand New York is a tough town and things of that nature. But I like seeing fans rallying around Soto, trying to bring him up. Like I said, it's a very long relationship that this is, the beginning of a very long relationship. So you don't want to start it off too negatively. So, shout out to fans that kind of use their brains a bit and said, let's build up our $76 million a year superstar instead of putting them down in April already. So things even that nature are turning. I don't know if that makes sense, but it just feels like maybe the fans are a little more understanding at this point because it seems like the success is going to be on the horizon for a little while. So people are a little more understanding, which is great.
Some compassion for the big switch. Right. He's lived in New York, but I think the kind of I'm making the big bucks now maybe kind of leads off to a slow start for Juan Soto, as I feel like anyone who's talked about Juan Soto has clarified. It's a slow start for Juan Soto.
Sure.
So we'll see. We'll see if he's able to turn it around. It just kind of seems like he's yanking everything on the ground right now. That is total vibes based. That is not backed up by any sort of number. He's obviously performing very poorly with runners in scoring position. Seems like if he's able to get on, he's able to do it via a single or a walk. Sure. I mean, I think his on base percentage is still in the 400s. And he's still going to find ways to get on base. And maybe he just hates the cold. We saw him standing out there with the
Yeah.
hoodie on, right? Maybe I know it's been a bit nicer out over the last couple of days in New York, but it's a very long season, and you're right, Sal. 14 2/3 more years, of which many are expected to be elite years.
Well, also too. Sorry, Sal. Also too. It's like I feel like you talk about the vibe shifting at Citi Field, but also just like the vibe shifting just in general with how players are treated here. We don't exactly live and die by what certain New York sports radio personalities say anymore. And we're certainly not the New York Yankees where we expect this sort of unrealistic excellence that is not given with the current resources that their owner has. So I think now, and especially it happened with Lindor last season, where everybody kind of, they took kind of that note, and I hate to mention Philly, but they cheered Trey Turner and it turned his season around, and they did it with Lindor, and newsflash, it worked. So, but I think also too, it's so counterproductive. And look, everybody has had it who's come here who's been a big name. Piazza got booed, Beltran got booed. Not that I'm agreeing with it. Roberto Alomar got booed, Mo Vaughn got booed.
They might have deserved it, but that's okay.
Well, yeah, they did, but Piazza didn't deserve it. I mean, Piazza started getting booed first month and a half in '98, and then had one of probably the best stretch runs you've ever seen a catcher have for this team. So it's par for the course. It's gonna happen because it is New York. But I think now, just with this social climate, I think people seem to be more understanding. And then just to add to the point about it being Juan Soto, he's still OPSing around 800. Still getting on base. He's getting at least 1 or 2 hits per game. It's not like he's hitting, he's striking out every at bat. He's still finding a way to produce, whether it's even small portions with the bat or like we saw the other day when he threw the runner out at home, So and also just the fact that his presence is there, I will 100% say that attributes to the successes of Lindor and Alonso, because you pitch them differently. You're pitching Soto one way, but you have to pitch Lindor and Alonso another way. And then with Alonso's adjustments and Lindor just absolutely killing it, it makes for a really good concoction. So if if you're 18-7 and Juan Soto is struggling and he has an OPS around 800, I mean, are we really is it really that bad? No, I don't think so.
That's where I think, right, like you kind of hear in the baseball world, like when a team's playing complete baseball or something, it's when pitching and offense is kind of performing all at the same time. The offense is coming around a little bit. It's just not Pete Alonso. The Mets were winning a lot of 2-1, 3-0 games, and now it seems like they're actually trying to score a little bit. And I'll be interested to see as the offense picks up, legitimately, once Juan Soto picks up, once McNeil and Alvarez come back, and we'll talk about that in just a minute. Once they come back, I wonder if that will be how well the pitching will continue to do, right? Because the Mets aren't just going to sit here and score 3 runs a game and only give up 2, so you hope once they start scoring 4 or 5, or you hope they start scoring 4 or 5 before the pitching kind of inevitably, goes through its sways of the season. Because the way they're pitching right now is just ungodly. It's I don't want to say unsustainable, because you want to believe in the kind of process and you want to believe in the players, right? But they're not allowing any home runs. Citi Field, we know, is particularly prone to not giving up home runs. Ton of balls getting hit on the ground. They're striking out a ton of people. It legitimately seems like they have a pitching philosophy when it comes to what they pitch, how they pitch, when they pitch it. Because over 20 something games now, 23, 24 games, however, 25, I think, it goes from being like a fluke, or, people being like, oh, David Stearns is at it again, to you eventually realizing maybe there's just a legitimate philosophy behind all of this, and all of the pitchers are bought into it. Right. Each pitcher has their own flavor and all that stuff. But then when it comes to the bullpen too, they've just got guys who they've clearly developed. And that's the other exciting part of it too, is that they're actually finding value in some players, not just out on the free agent market, but off the waiver wire, right? Or pulling people out of the minor leagues and having them come pitch for a little bit. So Yeah, we'll see the balance of the season as it continues to go along, right? Because like, I mean, you look at the Dodgers, and before the season, everyone's kind of, checking off that they're, World Series champions again, all that kind of stuff. But you got to play 162 games, and then you got to go to the playoffs. And I know Mike Petriello kind of made a joke about it, but he's like, yeah, they'll probably be pitching some random like guy who's 13th on their depth chart by like June 10th, and like turns out they're doing it like April 25th is when they're doing that. So we'll see how the rest of the season goes, but yeah, just it's about as good as you could have expected coming out of spring training, even coming out of that first series against the Astros, right? Like where they're not hitting. And Juan Soto was the only one who was. So yeah, we'll continue to see how it goes leading into Washington and over the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great point about the pitching. And talking about these waiver guys, especially, this kind of Stearns magic, and that's where he thrived in Milwaukee, and you're seeing it now here. It'll be cool to see how he continues to blend, Brian, finding those kind of fringe players to develop and get the most out of them, while also understanding you have the biggest, coin purse in the sport as well. So seeing him kind of continue to blend those two, I think are going to be interesting because, I think talk about Stearns with the pitching is great. I think Alonso coming back was not David Stearns. I don't think David Stearns really particularly wanted to bring him back after, signing Soto. I think that was a lot of Steve Cohen kind of not meddling, but digging his heels in and saying this is a player that the organization does want back. And you're seeing the dividends. The Mets would not be where they are without Pete Alonso. He's probably the best hitter in the National League right now. Definitely great protection for Soto. I know he had that other guy last year, but I think Pete Alonso is doing pretty good this year himself. But this is I don't want to even say growing pains, but things that Stearns going to learn a little bit on the job here. But you have to be just, so impressed by that duo. And then just want to bring up Mendoza. I feel like through all this, he kind of gets lost in the shuffle again. But the other night, in a situation where I think the whole world thought that Brandon Nimmo was going to pinch hit for Luis Torrens, he left the veteran catcher in there on an 0-2 pitch. Got the two RBI single or double, whatever it was, to give the Mets the lead. And I think that's just, another feather in the cap to what the Mets are building within the organization. Stearns understanding talent, not just within the players, but on, building a coaching staff. And it's just cool to see a manager, that necessarily that uses the book, goes by the book, has those numbers there as a guideline, but at times is going to go with his gut as a baseball person and think what's best. And we're seeing that with him. We saw it last year, and you're continuing to see it this year. And there's a reason why he was finals for Manager of the Year. I think he should have won it last year, but whatever. And big reason why the Mets are 18-7 this year. Just from the things he says about his players, he seems to know how to get the most out of them, and get them to play for him. And just his decision making in game. I mean, you can't say much. And you mentioned the pitching, Patrick. Obviously, it's been tremendous. You're going to have guys like Minaya and Montas coming back at some point, which is almost like deadline acquisitions before the deadline. So that can only help, because that would be if the only thing, like you said, kind of worries you. You worry about the usage of the bullpen and things like that. Yeah. We had the same worry last year. They figured it out. So, in Stearns, we trust in that regard. But it's just the metamorphosis just kind of, it feels like it's such a short time of the leadership in place. You're feeling it on the field now in like a tremendous way.
Yeah, I was just to like piggyback off that, and I don't want to call this the final frontier, the last hump to get over, right? But like the pitching clearly is becoming like a league-wide respected pitching organization, right? How they treat their players, how ownership and management treat the players seems to be, they've been getting a really good reputation for that, right? The fans are coming out. They have an owner who is willing to spend and isn't kind of shy to, and they have a GM who's not afraid to make moves. I think their last, again, hump to get over as an organization will be how can they eventually develop hitters?
Sure.
Because I don't know, McNeil and Alonso were probably the last two hitters to come up through the organization and kind of stick at the major league level, right? And some of the Mets' biggest top prospects, at least going into 2024, the Jet Williams, Drew Gilbert, Ryan Clifford, as they're getting these guys, Luis Angel Acuna, as they're getting these guys, can they actually develop them into like big league players and hitters? This could be a good transition into Brett Beatty, right? Like he's someone who the last couple of spring trainings, you think he's kind of making that switch. And honestly, I think the reason why Mets fans are so invested in him and attached to him is because you see the potential there, right? But then I think he's also kind of this like first beacon of like, can the Mets fix a guy? Can the Mets like actually implement a change to someone's hitting and how they are able to hit at the major league level? And I think that's the next big project, right? You've kind of built this great pitching lab, and let's see if you can move that to the hitting side as well, because that is when you become the Dodgers of the East, right? You're just this complete organization that has great fans. People want to go there. You kind of sustain that you can be trusted to develop them. It's the veterans who you look over at the Dodgers now. It's Michael Conforto. Not that he needs to be fixed, but just a ton of players who go over there, and then you're just like, how is this guy hitting in a platoon and he's OPSing like 820? And that's just what they do. So I'll be interested over the next couple of years. This is, again, I think the speed, Sal, that you pointed out that this change has been happening is I think a bit surprising. Sure. So of course the hitting, I think you would expect to take a couple more years to fully reveal itself, but it's all exciting nonetheless.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about, just to backtrack on happened with Buck, and you look at the way, and also this kind of ties into with just how organizational philosophy has changed. You look at just even at 2023, everything kind of seemed at kind of a low, even with Billy Epler coming in and Steve Cohen still being there, there seemed to be this sort of, everything's up in the air kind of thing. Steve Cohen decides to get his man David Stearns in almost immediately. I think from what I can remember correctly, they implemented the pitching lab in the summer of 23 for the major leaguers. It was happening a lot in Syracuse, but a lot of the major leaguers they didn't have that access yet, or it wasn't there for them yet. So you saw a lot of the issues that, they eventually fixed with the pitching staff. Now, everybody they threw out there was, awful, so to speak. Verlander, Scherzer, even a guy like Reed Garrett to a degree was not great. I could sit here, Jeff Brigham, to just name a bunch of players, whatever, just a lot of unsavory pitchers. And look, nothing against Jeff Brigham, major leaguer, better than me, didn't work out here. But then you just kind of saw this sort of apathy from Buck and apathy from management. So when they finally turned the table and actually got someone who was actually invested, not only with David Stearns, but also with Carlos Mendoza, and this also touches on the point just with the ball club in general. This is a tight-knit, fun ball club that cares about each other. They will go to bat for each person. Everyone on this team will go to bat for each person, no matter what happens. And you can see it. You can feel it. It is a palpable, good tension. And that all starts from a guy like Mendoza, and it goes all the way up to David Stearns and ultimately back to Steve Cohen. So with all of these things in place, it's beginning to foster this, you start from certain places here and there, manager, the executives up top, they had a whole deep cleaning essentially of the front office, over the last 2 off seasons. And then that begins to trickle into the minor leagues. So, to Pat's point, when you're looking at prospects, hitting prospects, because, naturally the Mets have always been more of a pitcher's organization over the years. That's why we get hooked on guys like Brett Beatty, like you said, Luis Angel Acuna. Right now, Ryan Clifford, Drew Gilbert, these guys are showing us things that we haven't really seen in the past. And that's why that adds to the excitement too, because then let's just say something happens to someone on the team, they can call someone up, bada bing, bada boom, they fit right in. Now you don't know what to do because they're playing well, and now you have to make a good, tough decision for the team. And that's how you want to operate. And I really feel with just the way that things are going, we're beginning to see more and more signs of the minor leagues really begin to flourish. And that all starts from Stearns, and even to a degree Mendoza, the coaching staff, and even a lot of the staff they have in the minor leagues. We have some of the best staffs, honestly, in the minors. I think a lot of players really beginning to show their true talent.
Yeah, and it's a big year for the hitters on the minor league side, but Unfortunately, Brett Beatty has joined him again, right?
Quadruple A Barry Bonds is back. Brett Beatty was DFA'd to make room for Jeffrey McNeil. The Squirrels coming.
Just sent down. He's not DFA'd yet. His
Excuse me.
not
So you're
over.
right. You're right. He just sent down the Triple A. I should say he got DFA'd.
Let's not get ahead of ourselves yet.
Because he will rake in Triple A like he usually does. It's interesting though, as far as with the case with Beatty. You hear Lindor talk a lot about, especially this year. Obviously, he's having a tremendous April. Just talking about trying to have quality at bats and make sure you're passing the baton on to the next guy. And it seems like most of the lineup has done that, right? Especially getting to the big boppers at the top, to Pete, so to speak. I wonder with Beatty if it's just, feeling the pressure of trying to stay up here, trying to do too much. It just felt like his pitch selection, things that he was trying to swing at, he was swinging through good pitches or just not selecting good pitches to swing at. And it just felt like it snowballs on him when he gets up at this level, whether it's, it's not spring training or AAA when he's up here for the regular season. It just feels like that gets too fast for him. And, listen, the talent is there. He's a big guy. He's athletic. I think he's played a much better second base than people give him credit for. He made a great pick the other day with Lindor throwing a ball in the hole to end an inning and making out. So he may just be a guy that eventually a change of scenery and another organization, a different philosophy may be what's best for him. But I mean, there's no surprise with, McNeil coming back and Luis Angel Acuna, just the speed and the dynamicism of him. You couldn't, unless Beatty, just really had a tremendous homestand where he was tearing the cover off the ball. There was no world where he was going to stay on the roster over Acuna. And I think the Mets made the right decision. Obviously, you have a really athletic guy. We know about his speed, plays good defense. He's hitting well to start the year too, which is, kind of over like he was riding at one point a 9-game hitting streak that just ended. We know he's a guy that apparently gets a little bored in AAA. He likes the light. So, all that being said, he's making the most of his opportunity. So, a platoon at second base between him and McNeil, lefty, righty there. I don't think that's the worst thing in the world that they did.
I'm trying to think through the thread here of what the Mets are thinking, right? And as the press conferences come out on Friday, which I'm guessing this will come out on Friday, Jose Azocar is still on the team. And if you kind of go down the line, right, you hear like they might try Acuna in center, they might try McNeil out in center. Brandon Nimmo had a long history of playing center field. And I think ultimately what they came down to was either A, do we keep Brett Beatty on the roster? He probably won't get a ton of at-bats.
Right. And
kind of go with this like Tyrone Taylor playing 80% of the time in center and one of those three guys playing the other 20, which perhaps your offense and your bench is a little bit better because of it. Or do we kind of maybe go with a more traditional, having a true fifth outfielder, and then have someone like Acuna, who honestly before the season, I kind of collaborated with Mike Mayer on a piece for Metsmerized where I was like, what do these top prospects need to do to kind of stick, improve, all that kind of stuff? And I think it was Beatty and it was Acuna and it might've been Mauricio, because those are kind of the three who like have MLB time, all kind of lumped into the same group. They're not part of that like newer class of prospects who hasn't broken through yet. And with Acuna, I believe it was in that article where Mike said like, hey, this guy, like, he might be an MLB starter for a time, but where his biggest value in the major leagues are his speed and his defense. And if he's able to hit enough, he'll stick around for a long time.
Sure. And
kind of what are you seeing these first couple of weeks, right? It's those times where his bat isn't there. Like, sure, he'll have a hot 10 games where he's, he might bat 320 or something like that, but then he'll go cold for a couple of games. But while he's cold, he's playing great defense and is very clearly the fastest guy on the team, right? So my guess would be is that versatility and that kind of impact that's not at the plate that the Mets really, really need. They have a pretty old roster. I mean, Starling Marte hasn't played the field yet. Yeah. Jesse Winker, they would prefer him to not play the field. So you're kind of like two down in the field there. I think they just wanted to kind of stack the roster with a couple of guys who, like, in that 7th, 8th, 9th inning could get subbed in for whomever. And it's a bummer for Beatty because he's actually been playing decent for the last week or two, right? John Luke at the stadium yesterday, what was it like? Friggin' Brett Beatty homering off Zach Wheeler. What was the were people kind of turning left and right and saying what happened?
I want to say it's surprising, but it definitely did catch me off guard, because you really began to like, just at least with the way the at bat went, even though he didn't really do much the rest of the game, you can see just how he was able to adjust to Wheeler after the fact. So I mean, it did throw me off a little bit, but it was nice to see that the general vibe about Beatty around the crowd was everyone was pretty supportive of him. I feel like everyone who's been watching him for some time knows the type of potential that he has. He looked, and then just defensively too, he looked like he belonged, and I'm honestly kind of shocked that they demoted him, but at the same time, I could understand why. You pretty much just explained it, that they don't want to. Your guy's going to perform well, you got to get him at bats, but also it also just kind of shows, well, what do you have in him after a bit? So, yeah, it's definitely. I guess you could call this a good problem, because now it kind of gives them more options to kind of play with tinkering the roster. Keith Rad said this on yesterday's broadcast, because I do my videos and I go through the audio, and he basically said that the roster in April is going to be vastly different from the roster in September and hopefully October. So these are just the kind of decisions that have to come for teams like this, especially teams who are good. I kind of harken back to 2006 a little bit. There were a lot of like similar roster moves where the Mets were kind of letting go guys who were good, but you just kind of have an embarrassment in riches. A lot of it was in the bullpen. Ultimately we all know what happened with the bullpen after that. But, at the beginning of the season, they had a lot of live arms, but they just kind of couldn't really use them, and yeah, I mean, just, I think the kid has something, but at what point, what do you do?
Yeah, I don't think anybody was more surprised about that home run than Zach Wheeler, probably in the ballpark.
Well, it was an interesting stat. I think Mike posted this.
Okay.
I think it was something about gosh, I wish I had pulled it up because it's coming to me. But basically, what Brett Beatty did was not something that many players did against Zach Wheeler. Was turning a really fast fastball on him out of the park at the launch, at the exit velocity and angle that he was able to do it too. So. Like you said, I really think he was actually surprised that he turned on that one.
Oh, yeah. Zach Wheeler's thrown over 21,200 pitches in the StatCast era. Only 3 of them, including this shot by Brett Beatty, have been turned around for homers of at least 113 miles an hour.
Wow.
There you go.
So,
well, thank you for your contribution, because that helped win the game on Wednesday. So that was very good, Brett.
Yeah.
You
hope you hope it's kind of like the Vientos vibe from last year.
Sure.
Right?
Absolutely.
If you are Brett Beatty, right, is that, Vientos hit the walk-off homer, right, and then got sent down the next day, and he came back up a month later and, he performed really well. I mean, it's not like Mark Vientos is tearing the cover off the ball right now, a
bit of a sophomore slump going on.
Right. So it's kind of like, all right, if that goes on for another month, do you call Beatty back up and you let Vientos reset? Like, again, these are, like John Luke said, like they seem armed for for all the different sorts of possibilities of how the season can play out. Right. And that's kind of what you just want to be going into the season.
Yeah, and real quick, you brought up Vientos. That brings me to kind of another point I wanted to talk about real quick, was Brandon Nimmo in the cleanup spot. Out of everything that's going on offensively, it just does not seem like, it didn't seem like a fit for me in the beginning. I always wanted Alonso to be the cleanup hitter. I just feel like he's a classic cleanup hitter. But as we know, wherever Soto was going to hit, Alonso was hitting behind him. Soto wants to hit 2, then Alonso was hitting 3. That's just kind of is what it is. But my hope was that Vientos could start off strong enough where eventually he could kind of solidify into the cleanup role. I know righty, they probably don't love that. That's another reason why you probably have Nimmo behind Alonso to break it up. But it just feels like, as far as Nimmo, it's just not his game. He's obviously seems like he's selling out a lot, pull power-wise. He's swinging and missing a lot more pitches than we're used to. And he's a guy that even when he wasn't necessarily hitting, he walked at an elite clip, right? Almost like a Soto in that regard. Tremendous eye, would walk a lot. You're not seeing that now because obviously the role he's trying to play, hit behind Alonso, a little more power. It just feels like, though, certain players are built to do certain things. He just does not seem like the kind of the cleanup hitter that can go through a whole season for, himself and just kind of for the Mets lineup. I'm hoping Vientos gets hot because I would love to see him hit behind Pete. I don't really care the righty behind each other. I think if you guys that slug and if he could protect Pete, I think he would be a much better option at the cleanup spot. But we'll see how things go here. Nimmo's a gamer. He's always going to keep grinding, but it just feels like a lot more swing and miss in his game now that we're used to. And I think that's as a result of where he's hitting now in the order. Patrick, just real quick, want to get your thoughts on it.
Yeah, I think Mendoza gives guys lots of chances to exist, but he's also not shy about moving them down. It seems like he'll hit as high as 4th and as low as 5th or 6th.
Yep.
I mean, Vientos, as he's been going through it, has been as high as 4th and as low as 5th or 6th. I'll be interested to see where McNeil and Alvarez kind of like play into the scenario. Yeah, I mean, we'll with Nimmo, he's become a streaky hitter, right?
Sure.
It's he's on it for 3 weeks and then he's cold for 5 weeks and then he's on it for 4 weeks and then he's cold for 2 weeks. It just kind of seems like he's become that kind of guy, especially over the last couple of years, as he's become a little more power happy. Perhaps that's just where he's lying right now. I wonder if in the future, if he has that kind of like 360 on base percentage with a little bit of power in his back pocket, kind of needs to rest on those laurels and based on what the team needs, right? But yeah, it's kind of just a rotating cast of characters right now behind Pete. But if we're being honest, Lindor and Peter are the ones carrying it right now, and you kind of give these other guys time to figure it out.
Sure.
Well, just kind of thinking about it, just with Nimmo, I think he's having. Well, first off, I still think he's suffering from the plantar fasciitis.
Sure.
Because that's something that's not going to go away overnight, and you could tell it still seems like it's affecting him. And one of the things, if you've ever played baseball or softball in any form of another, two of the things that you need the most are your hips and your feet.
Sure.
So it's just that, and it seems like he's still being affected by it. And I think he's trying to hit too many home runs, but hopefully you just hope that tendency to chase kind of lowers at a certain point, and he could just get back to just hitting it hard, like what McNeil did when he came back. Just hit the ball hard, and the rest will follow. So you just hope that that's the case.
Yeah, no, it's interesting. It's a good point. They said the other day on the broadcast that he still is dealing with it every day. He gets treatment for it every day. So that was interesting to hear, after, a whole off season, spring training, that he's still something he's dealing with. So maybe they're trying to keep him fresher. So, come the, the sprint, July, August, September, that he's more fresh than he was. Because I think everybody come playoff time, he was kind of a shell of himself. If it wasn't the playoffs, he would have obviously been on the deal. He really couldn't move at all. But he's a guy that wants to be out there. He's a gamer, which we appreciate. Just, like you said, hopefully he can kind of get into a little bit more of what we've seen in the past. But at this point, Patrick, to your point too, he might just be a streaky hitter. That's just who he is. But if you want to sprinkle in, a few more walks here and there, I won't hate it, Brandon. That's fine. But, other than that, I want to preview the Nats series coming up. Mets fans know the Nats well. It's different face than we used to the last few years, but it seems like these younger guys now, the Mackenzie Gores, the CJ Abrams, the James Woods, this kind of young nucleus, the Nats were hoping the last couple of years when they kind of traded their other core. Seems like they're starting to come together, and it's, a pretty young, exciting team. I think they're going to be better than people give them credit for, but, I think the Mets, if they want to make it 10 in a row, they could do that if they'd like.
11. They're playing. This is one
is
of
it
those
a 4-game series? Even
this
better.
Is one of those weird wraparound to Monday.
Oh wow!
They've got a weird schedule coming up. It's like the series wraps around to Monday. They have a day game Sunday, day game Monday. They come back home for 3 games, and they leave for another week.
Wow.
If I'm not mistaken, St. Louis and Arizona.
Yeah,
and then legit they leave New York one time the next month after that. Their only road series are the Yankees and Boston. So interesting series coming up. The Nationals themselves, their pitching stinks. They don't like the Mackenzie Gore is great. But outside of that, it's a little bit touch and go, especially as you get to their bullpen. Really poor bullpen. Seems right now in their lineup, there's maybe 2 or 3 guys who are playing pretty well. It's James Wood, who seems like he could hit homers off any pitch to any part of the park. Keibert Ruiz is playing well. Nat Lowe, I think, is doing pretty well for them at first base. But yeah, in theory, you kind of come in 18-7. You come in hot. You feel like this is a series that they could pretty easily win. So I'm interested in that day game Monday. We'll see. Not too often the Mets get a lot of like wraparound series to Monday, and I don't know. After this, I'm kind of eventually they'll get out of their spring trade. It seems like all they're playing right now. They played the Astros, they played the Marlins a bunch, they played the Cardinals, played the Nationals again. Just feels like they've been playing these same teams for 2.5 months now. So just kind of get done with them, and we'll kind of get to the meat of the schedule.
Yeah, for sure. It's interesting to say, seeing the Mets kind of come in at this standpoint with the way they are. But teams like this, they're the Mets are the hunted now, so the Nats are going to kind of pop that balloon a little bit. But this is a team that hopefully continue to hit a little bit more. Pitching can stay what they're doing, and it'll be another series one. It'll be interesting to see. But I think that's going to wrap it up this week. Nice long show for us, guys. Thanks so much for coming on. We'll keep you updated next week. Is this, as Patrick mentioned, gauntlet of games for the Mets start coming up here. So we'll see how they respond to playing a bunch of games in a row. But as always, and until then, let's go Mets, everybody.